alienating parents, there is a tendency to demonise them as evil and bad. They are certainly dangerous, I'll give you that. So I'm compassionate about alienating parents because the ones that I've worked with, they're mainly women. They often had horrible childhood histories of family violence and sexual abuse. They never received any adequate support, even into their adult years. And so they were led to basically replicate their early experiences in their families and treat their partners as though they were their original abusers. And then they used parental alienating behaviours. So my compassion there is to say, well, I know you were made that way, you're not born that way, and there must be a way of helping you not hurt yourself or other people. The cold part is, I know how dangerous you are. I know that you won't stop unless you're stopped. And I know that you'll do whatever it takes. The ends justify the means. I'm very clear there has to be incentives to do the right thing for their children and consequences for not. And that's the big deficiency in family law systems around the world. They don't enforce their orders. I know it sounds horrible. I wonder what would happen if we sent a few parents to jail, which I think is the approach they use in Israel. It's called therapeutic jurisprudence, what I call the iron fist and the velvet glove. You know, what is the role of the state with families? Should we leave families alone, let them get on with it the way they do? Well, yes, but what do you do when they fragment from within? So then, if the state's going to have an involvement, it has to be prepared to enforce that involvement. And here is a problem with responsibilities and rights. We're very focused on children as being number one, as a centre of our focus with parental alienation. Children have rights, and parents don't have rights. They have responsibilities to their children's rights. But how does that parent fulfil that responsibility? What are their rights to fulfil their responsibility to their children? So we don't give them that right. We disempower those parents. So then if you read the United Nations Charter for the Rights of the Child, and I think the European Human Rights Charter has something similar, that the state is required to support parents in their responsibilities. So then what it means is an alienated parent should be able to turn to the state and say, hey, I've got a responsibility to my child to sort this out. I need your support. In the majority of cases, that support doesn't come, and they get blamed for the situation they're in. So that's something that needs to be fixed around the world. The state either needs to keep out or step in firmly and be really clear that the family's at stake here and the family's the building block of society. So a place where this has come undone in a big way is in my home country, Australia, where we've had some recent changes to family law, and they've removed a presumption of equal shared parenting. It was conditional anyway on the safety of the child. So there was a heavy family violence component to it anyway. They also removed from the Family Law Act what I think is one of the best functional examples of parental alienation as a form of family violence. So they took that away as well. They took away any notion that family relationships were important to a child. So this is straight out of the Karl Marx handbook. You know, it literally, as a parent, trying to seek remedies for your abused child, I can almost guarantee that engaging in family law is engaging with a group of people, an institution, that does not share their views of what a family is. And if parents knew that, really, they would be truly shocked. So it's kind of happened without any real consultation. There's a very strong gendered family violence lobby group. I want to be clear that I know family violence happens, right? So that isn't the issue. The issue is, dealing with that one at the expense of everything else, and also stigmatising 50% of the population by virtue of their gender. So if you're a man in Australia, you are deemed to be a perpetrator by virtue of your gender. So that doesn't give men a lot of incentive to change, because if the only identity you have is, well, you're a man, therefore you are oppressing women, and there's really no way out of that identity, then not oppressing women doesn't give you any particular social advantages. The stricter and tighter and the more legislation they have against family violence, the more punitive they become, the more there is. But I do wonder if some men in those situations, from a family violence point of view, think, well, what more is there to lose? But these lobby groups have influenced the government to say they have to fund gendered family violence. I think there's a recent news about $700 million is going towards gendered family violence initiatives in Australia. Parental alienation is a form of non-gendered family violence. The statistics are clear. Both men and women equally perpetrated and are equally victims of it, let alone the children. So we are captured by this ideology that says everything has to be gendered. And parental alienation stands against that to say, not us. It's not a gendered form of family violence. And so one of the things about the field of parental alienation, the study of it, is that it holds other areas of thought accountable. We don't accept on face value that an allegation of family violence or child sexual abuse is true. What we say is, find the facts, investigate it, then decide. Instead of what happens now, preemptive action. So the first thing that happens with an allegation of family violence and child sexual abuse is that the child's removed. So the accusing parent has the right, and the law supports them in preventing contact with the other parent. The other parent who is accused has to prove they didn't do something, which is almost impossible. What happens in Australian family law? 3 to 4 years, $500,000 is what it costs a parent who's been falsely accused of family violence to recover their children, if they're lucky. You can do it, but only if you're wealthy. So it's a solution that's not available to the ordinary punter, as we say, because there just isn't enough money. So there's a social injustice and inequity there, that you've got alienated parents who themselves have been abused because they've been exposed to harmful behaviours, trying to rescue their children and finding the state is implicated in the actual alienation, and then they have to pay the kidnapper to release their children. There's another social injustice angle. In Australia, with child support, it's enforced and payment is taken independently of family law. So if you separate and divorce, your ex-partner makes an immediate application to the child support agency, and there's an assessment, and you are required to pay regardless of whatever decision the family court makes. The payment is tied to income and the amount of time the child spends with you. What a surprise that alienating parents make sure that the child spends 100% of the time with them, which means they get the maximum payments. So you can bankrupt a parent in that process while they're trying to recover their child from abuse. So what happens is that, independently of the family court decision, they're paying child support to the parent who's abused their child. And there's no relationship with the child, and child hates that parent, but their money is okay. Now, I don't know any parent who'd bring up their child with those sort of values. So there's an example of family values enforced by the state that if parents knew about it, they would be horrified. And it's supposed to be in the child's best interest. We have what I would call a politicised notion of the child's best interest. I would say it's a pretty loose concept anyway, but in a context in which family relationships aren't valued, the child's best interest doesn't necessarily include them. So we have decisions by the courts that are very critical about the residential parent. They've been alienating the child, but it's in the child's best interest to remain living with them and to have no further contact with the parent they were coerced to reject. And that parent may have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to that point. So they're validating bad parenting in the child's best interest. That's a model of parenting I don't know that anyone would agree with. So we have a lot of work to do to educate people and a lot of work to replace the extremists. There's no negotiating with them. We know that we don't negotiate with terrorists and we don't pay ransoms, and that's true in families as well. And that's what we should be doing. Some bridges we can build, some we can't.